Welcome to the latest episode of Seekr Speakers. And today we have long-time client and ambassador, Rama, who is currently VP People at scale-up hyperexponential. Welcome, Ash.
Thank you very much for having me. It's good to be here.
So tell us a little bit about what you're here to talk about today.
So I'm here to talk about quite a broad topic, but this idea of finding your culture match. So I think that's a two-way street. So as a candidate in the market, or even if you're not in the market and you're working at a business, it's understanding how much or how well your values align to the values of the business. And then the other way around as well. So if you're in a business and you're talking to candidates or looking to make sure that you've got that match between you and your employees, it's how your values and your culture match into the people you have and the people you're looking to attract.
Okay, excellent. So before we dive into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and what you're doing currently?
Sure. So as you said, currently a VP People at hyperexponential. So we're an insurance tech business. We're currently sort of 170-ish people in the UK, in the US, and in Poland, scaling very, very quickly. We recently Series B funded, and we're doing what most Series B funded businesses do, which is growing like crazy, but trying to do it in all the right ways. Prior to that, I was a VP People at Mention, a marketing tech company. Where again it's a Series B. You'll see a theme for it in a minute. So as a Series B company, UK based, also grew into the US as well, and spent a few years there. And then prior to that, another Series B company, but that was Trustpilot. I was there for over 6 years, and I saw that journey from Series B all the way through into a unicorn IPO. So really great to see that whole journey. I won't go into too much detail prior to that, but I've got a background in sales prior to that. So sales, L&D. Leadership development, coaching, talent, and now VP People. So bit of an odd journey, but that's my background.
Great.
Yeah.
So how do you find a business that aligns with your own value set? And as a candidate, how do you assess that throughout the interview process?
I think there's loads in there, and especially as a candidate, when you're assessing companies, there's loads you're going to be seeing. There's going to be the values page, there's going to be candidate packs, there's going to be Glassdoor reviews, there's going to be things on YouTube, social media. There's so much you could be looking at, but how do you actually assess what the values are, not just what's written down, what you read?
Okay.
And I think within that comes how, as a candidate, you decide to evaluate where these values actually manifest within the business. What I mean by that is when you're going through the interview process and you're looking at the candidate comms, when you're interviewing with various people through the process as well, I think it's about being really specific on the questions you want to ask around values, and not necessarily just what are the values and where do they appear. It's asking the individuals in the process where they see the values manifest in certain situations. And I think the important ones are things like, how do the values come up when important decisions need to be made? How do the values come up when you're deciding on who to hire? And that's not just about you, that's about how the business hires overall. How do the values come up when you're thinking about things like employer branding and how you show up as a business to the world? What is it about your values you're trying to tell the world? And a lot of the time, what you pick up on through research doesn't always align with what you hear in those conversations. What you hear is probably more of the truth of today. What you see in your research is probably more of the aspirational stuff the business is trying to do. So that's probably the starting point.
Okay, so there's clearly lots of different types of things that you can pick up in relation to values, but what are the common types of values?
Yeah, there's quite a few, and it's good to be aware of where these different types of values come in, how they play out, and which types of values are important to you as an individual. So there's a few models, lots out there you could look up on the types of values. The one that I see as sort of one of the most useful ones is something that Patrick Lencioni, business consultant, talks about in some of his work, is 4 types of values. There's aspirational values, the core values to the business, the pay-to-play values, which I'll talk about in a bit, and then there's accidental values. And most businesses have a combination of those 4, but kind of by accident. And the most common ones, I think, are accidentally having aspirational values. So you'll have a business that's got these values set because that's what they're trying to work towards. Like they'd love to be the business that behaves and operates in this way with this value set. And then the other type of value you're likely to pick up on are these pay-to-play ones. And what I mean by that is the absolute table stakes. So it's to be an employee at this business, this is the bare minimum of how you have to behave. And if we don't see this, you're definitely not sort of the cultural match for us. Not many businesses do that intentionally, but I think it's good to know that what are the bare minimum standards for the business, and is that part of your value set? And if it is, if the answer is yes, the bare minimum standards are in our values here, then it shows that the business is aware of what those standards are. I think it's really good to be able to pick up on that. And then there's the core values, and the core values typically are the values that are, at the heart of the business. So these values would describe who we are as a company. If the company is able to show you that these values within our value set are our core values, then you can see that who they are as a business is built into that value set, and the business is conscious about that. And I think that shows some confidence in the business. So those are the types of values to just be aware of and question around. So if you're aware of those types of values, being able to build a question set through your interview stages around those will help you understand how the values are helping the business be aspirational. What are those fundamentals that the business is just like a non-negotiable, like this is just how we operate, this is what we expect as a bare minimum. And then that identity of the business, or those core values, are sort of baked into the values as well. And that could just help you with structuring those questions around values and helping you to understand how well that does or doesn't align with what you're looking for.
But how do you prioritize those values?
That's a good question. I think that's a really personal thing. So if you're interviewing with a business that's, really early stage, and they're really setting a lot of those the foundational things about the business, you should probably expect from a lot of the values to be aspirational. Now, if you're looking for, and what that means is aspirational values could mean that actually you're heading towards a lot of change because of what the business is going through. And for some people, in a value set way, that's going to be really inspiring because that's what they're looking for. A big challenge, lots of change, not much by way of, not having much stability is a good thing. And that could be what they're looking for. And that could be the signal that you need. But if you're looking for a business that's really structured and quite heavy on the process side of things because of the stage they're at, or the size they are, or because of how they operate, because of the industry they're in, whatever it might be, those values could be a good signal that that's how they operate, not just because of the industry and how big they are, but their values clearly tell you that that's how you want to operate, and that's how they do operate.
So if somebody's looking for a new role, how much do you want your personal value set to align with the business and its values?
So yeah, it's a really good thing to be thinking about. And it's going to be quite personal naturally, but there's definitely going to be a value in you being aware of how aligned or misaligned some of your personal values are to the business. And some businesses will help you do this quite well. Some businesses won't be so intentional about it, but there's always places to build your awareness on your personal values and the business's values and the alignment there. Actually, I can reflect on hyperexponential. So we have a value stage within our interview process where there's 60 minutes just to talk about values and alignment on that front. So for example, one of our values is we push boundaries. And what we mean by that is having this sort of mindset where you're aware that you're probably working on a challenge that hasn't been sort of done before. No one's really got the playbook on it. There's not a blueprint, and there's not sort of a blog out there of, the top 3 tips on overcoming this challenge, like it's not been done. And the likelihood of success is completely unknown. Now, when I describe that, there's going to be a group of people that think that is not the kind of challenge I want to take on because of all of those risks you just said. And there's a whole group of other people that would be like, that's exactly what I want to be doing day to day. And just by asking that kind of question in a very values-driven way, your instant reaction as a candidate to that question, and if it makes you really nervous, then you know that there might be a bit of misalignment there, or what the expectations, the behavioral and value-driven expectations are, compared to what it is you really want to do. But if you react really positively to it with, that's the kind of work I want to be doing, that's how I want to feel about the work I'm doing and the challenges I take on, then that's a really strong signal that you've got values alignment. Mm-hmm. So, and not all companies will do a value stage interview. But if they don't, you could do your own. I think for candidates, it's when you've got those few minutes, there definitely should be more time for candidates to ask questions, but normally it's a few minutes at the end to ask those questions. Ask value-driven questions. Ask the person that's interviewing you about how a decision is made and where the values come in, or how certain values that you've picked up on manifest in the business today. And even asking, are these values core values to the business, or are they aspirational? Is it something the business is working towards? Can you give me examples of where they play out? And that'll definitely give you that insight into alignment.
And so other than asking these questions during a Q&A, is there any other way to assess alignment throughout the interview process?
Definitely. So I think there's loads of ways without intentionally sort of asking or consciously asking about it. And I think it starts with that screening call. From the screening call, even the job ad. So the tone of voice being used, and I think we all know, talent partners who are sort of in the business working as talent partners. They are representative of the business, and a lot should be taken from that. It shouldn't just be seen as, this is a team that recruits for the business. They're in the business, they're part of it, and they should absolutely represent and reflect, who the business is, how they operate, and the values as well. So I think there's the tone of voice, the choice of language being used in these points of communication, and I think even things like the standards that the talent team upholds for communication cadences. And candidate comms in general. And then even things like quality of feedback. So if, for example, you notice that a business has got, radical candidate feedback as one of their values or one of their expected behaviors, but you don't feel you're getting that from the hiring process, then that's potentially a point to asking about that, the difference between the values that you've seen and the experience you're having as a candidate. And I don't think it's a bad thing to sort of ask and challenge those sorts of things when they're picked up on. And I think the final thing is, short of asking about the values, it's getting to know or sort of reading between the lines of what is it they're testing for in these interview stages, just beyond the job spec.
Okay.
Because there's going to be things like, and not necessarily just personality traits, but there's going to be things like dynamics within a team, and you won't necessarily have met that team. But how they're interviewing, the questions they're asking, are going to be a signal for what it is in terms of the type of person that's going to climb on that team. Mm-hmm. So I think it's always worth paying attention, but as much as you can, to not just what the questions are, but how they're being asked and who's asking them, and the kind of specific language being used within those questions as well.
And how much credence should you put on ratings, awards, like Sunday Times Top 100 company to work for?
That's a really good question. I think some. I think it's a take it with a pinch of salt sort of thing. I think every business should be proud of all the awards they have, of course, because it's reflective of who they are as a business. It's a reflection of, for certain awards, criteria that they are able to meet as a business. So I think it's good for those things. It's always interesting though to understand what those awards measure, to understand what the award means, because different awards will measure different things.
Yeah.
So I think that's one good thing to do. I think and then on the other side of the spectrum, I guess, is then you have Glassdoor, where you've got reviews from existing and past employees as well, which again, I think everything is taken with a grain of salt. Mm-hmm. Because there's always more nuance than the headline and just a little bit of written text or an award. So I think everything in moderation, essentially, but take it all in. And if you looked at it all holistically, then what would your overall opinion be? If you had to put a headline to everything you researched about the business and put it all together, what would the headline about the business be? And that's sort of that's what it suggests doing. So you're not necessarily taking siloed bits of information, because that'll only ever give you a perspective.
Sure. And would you ever recommend speaking to a previous employee?
That's a very good question. I would say yes. I think there's a lot of value in that, obviously, and there's going to be reasons why the individual's moved on, and those reasons are not always going to be negative. But there will be sometimes people that moved on because the business wasn't quite right for them. But from a very pragmatic perspective of, this wasn't a values fit for me, or this wasn't the kind of intensity I was looking for, or maybe the industry didn't have the level of interest that they were expecting. There could also be, the working dynamic on the team is not something I was used to, or the ways of working, or the habits and behaviors and that kind of thing. So many reasons, but that doesn't mean it's a bad place to work for everyone. So I'm a huge supporter of speaking to previous employees.
And maybe a current employee might be one of them?
Possibly. It depends whether, if you're speaking to a past employee who left 10 years ago, there's already maybe not so much fun in there. But someone that left within the last 12 months or so, and is willing to talk about it and share their experiences, I think that's a good sign, the fact that they want to talk about it, and it's not just to convince you not to work there, So even that, always take this shot. Yeah, it's not going to help you make a decision at all. Current employees, of course, with the interview process, you're going to be speaking to current employees, but I think you make a good point that in the interview, anyone that's involved in the interview process has got an objective within that process. While if you were to ask to speak to a peer just over a coffee or an informal chat, that probably give you a slightly different perspective.
Okay. So how do you know if there's misalignment?
I think that's where actually it's a really good point, that you might read something on the value start on the website or a candidate pack and that kind of thing. And then when you start, or even after you've started and as things change in the business, like every business goes through change consistently, things might change to a point where you don't recognize that those values you read about, or those behaviors that you saw in a video, or all those kinds of things. So what you read versus what you're experiencing, feel like they're quite far apart. And if that's the case, there's some reflection to do there, and you might look at what you're experiencing as, this isn't for me, and this is a misalignment, and therefore it's time to look at something else, or it's time to have a conversation with my peers or my manager about these differences I'm experiencing, to sort of try and build a broader context of why that could be happening, and that could just be a healthy conversation to have. The other approach to it could be that this is just different for me. So everything I've experienced prior to now has been a different environment with different types of personalities, because it's a different industry, a different size company. There's so many factors that can make everything so different, that this is just different. And the decision could be, actually, I want to expand my experience of working cultures and business cultures. So I'm going to lean into it and adapt as much as I can to learn from this and become part of it. And that in itself could be a really positive result, because then you've expanded your working experiences of different value sets and different behaviors and different people and personalities and ways of working, which could then change your mind or slightly adjust how you think about what you want to do next. So I think there's just value in it. If there is a misalignment, what on the surface could come across as, this isn't what I was expecting, there's still decisions to be made on what you want to do with that, which I think is just a healthy way of looking at it.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
Especially, I like the 4 pillars and how you identify those from a business perspective. Well, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a pleasure as always. And we'll see you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, George.